Hard, he replied. I had barely finished asking Renard how he would describe government in America when this single syllable pierced the room and hung there, simple and strange. The government is hard, he repeated. After a long pause and seeing that I was confused about what he said, he found more words to explain. Government is like freedom, he said, but not freedom. We're free, but we're not free. I met Renard and his friends, Reggie and Xavier, in New Orleans, where they were participating in a program called the Cornerstone Builders, which is an AmeriCorps program for people who have recently left the criminal justice system and are trying to gain a foothold back in community life. Most of what Renard, Xavier, and Reggie know and understand about government derived from experiences with the state institutions that they knew best and saw the most frequently in their communities, the criminal justice system. As Xavier illustrated, using the salt shakers on the table to map out a replica of his town. In the left corner, there was a police station. In the right corner, a court. And at the apex, a jail, a Bermuda Triangle of sorts. They joked that so many of their neighbors had a criminal record that the unofficial town slogan was "Come on vacation, leave on probation." In the time we spent with Renard and his friends, it became clear that the experiences of criminal justice institutions had conveyed important lessons about their social and political standing in America, about how government treated and valued them. They described how, by virtue of being young, black, and poor, they and those like them were suspicious to the state and subjected to frequent, almost weekly, police stops. They got to look at us as people, Xavier explained to us. It's like they're hunting tigers or something, or lions. If you get to know me, I'm the funniest person. But me, I'm black, I got a mouthful of gold and tattoos on me. I'm already looking like a drug dealer. And once they were in the system, having been arrested or fingerprinted, they felt permanently stigmatized. Once you mess up, you've given your life over to the government because they got you. Democracy don't get you a second chance. But perhaps most importantly, they did not feel that they had a voice in the processes that governed their very lives and felt unimportant to governing authorities meant to represent the will of the people. Ain't no government official coming into my neighborhood talking with me, straight up. Renard and his friends are far from unique. Many young black men in America have their earliest and most memorable interaction with the state in an encounter with police. Their lives are demarcated by the experiences of being patted down, being led away in handcuffs, and learning the isolation and segregation of prison life. Prisons and jails have been home to almost 70% of black men without a high school education, born since the mid-1970s. Here in Baltimore and Washington, D.C., at its high point, half of black men are under some form of correctional supervision. What does American democracy look like to these young folks? What practices do they see enshrined in government? What lessons do they learn and hear it espoused? And what have they come to expect from their elected officials and political institutions? How do these individuals experience American citizenship today? We set about to answer these questions in a recent book titled Arresting Citizenship, The Democratic Consequences of American Crime Control. And today I will draw on the ethnographic research and the quantitative survey research we used for that book. And we did the qualitative research in Trenton, New Jersey, Charlottesville, Virginia, and New Orleans, Louisiana. I would like to make 4 broad claims. First, over the past few decades, incarceration became perhaps the central way that the state interacts with poor minorities, changing the face of the state in some communities. That is to say, in areas where police, courts, and prisons represent the most familiar bureaucracy to residents, these areas come to see local governing institutions as arbitrary, harmful, and untrustworthy and illegitimate. Incarceration is increasingly very densely concentrated in certain communities and even neighborhood blocks. So here in Baltimore, some communities send no members of their communities and breadwinners and churchgoers to prison each year. Other communities have rates of incarceration that are 45 per 1,000 in the community. Increasingly, we've also changed the face of government in these communities. So when we looked at the Fragile Families data, we found something striking. Normally, we conceive of government as the welfare state, something to uphold the collective good. But we found that among poor young men, they had rates of being arrested or stopped by police or convicted that were actually higher than rates of receiving some of our most traditional anti-poverty programs. So with the exception of the Earned Income Tax Credit, they actually rivaled experiences with the criminal justice institutions, rivaled experiences with the social welfare provision. Second, criminal justice transforms the lived experience of citizenship by exposing people to what I would call anti-democratic institutions. What do I mean by anti-democratic? Democratic institutions, it is certainly uncontroversial to say that one of their primary principles is that they allow the voices of people to be heard, they are accountable to people, they're responsive to their claims, and they're transparent. In all of these domains, criminal justice institutions fail the democratic test. Third, these encounters with anti-democratic institutions matter for what they teach citizens. Rather than learning that American government is accountable, responsive, and supportive of citizen participation and social equality, indeed the hallmarks of a democratic polity and the American creed, they come to view the political system as being at least in part, if not primarily, about control, authority, and dominance. Instead of securing the collective good, many told us government's primary purpose was to keep citizens in line. And instead of developing the tools and ethos of engaged citizens, custodial citizens learned to stay quiet, make no demands, and be wary and distrustful of political authorities. We find in our quantitative analysis that at each level of criminal justice interaction, from a minor stop by police on up to incarceration, at each level, having any kind of contact with criminal justice diminishes people's likelihood of engaging in the political process through things like voting and registering to vote, engaging with civic groups, even among those who are formally allowed to vote in the political system. They diminish trust in government. They increase the likelihood that people say government won't respond to people like them in their communities. And we find these again and again and again, even controlling for other background demographic factors. Now, these encounters, and what I want to focus on today, is sort of the racial learning that people have through these encounters. And what we find is that criminal justice institutions are a central site of racial socialization, where what it means to be black is conveyed and learned, mostly involuntarily. First, we found that even without putting race on display directly, encounters with criminal justice provide powerful intuitions about who should be where, what was suspicious, how they should act, and the main behaviors that were off limits to people like them. So, for instance, they had learned to always carry ID, avoid certain areas and styles of dress, always get a bag and a receipt when leaving stores. And this subtle racial education was evident even among those who believed in equal chances, like Charles. Charles told me that he felt treated fairly, but he said, I mean, being stopped for no reason, especially if there's more than two. More than two, we asked? More than two black people in a car. That's pretty much like it's forbidden. We also found that on balance, black custodial citizens register much higher levels of personal and group-based discrimination, a diminished faith in equality, and greater discontent with government treatment than blacks who had never had contact. They exhibited a stronger sense that their individual fates were linked to the racial group, and they did not share in equal opportunities extended to other groups. Many believed that criminal justice was part of a concerted effort of racial domination, a gentler kind of genocide, as Trina put it, meant to contain and keep blacks out of the mainstream from jobs, housing, and political influence. As Trina said, that's the way the system wants it. It's just a more gentler form of genocide to me. It helps keep procreation down for the black race. I think this country fears black males, so you keep them corralled, you keep them locked up, you keep their spirits broken. Surely we thought these were exaggerations, but we found time and time again people reported to us that they felt that criminal justice treated blacks as inferior citizens. Here's the real rub, though. We found that unlike earlier institutions that could be conceivably made, that could be conceivably said to have made race by explicitly dividing groups and subjecting them to different treatment, as a matter of legal norm, because it exaggerates individual agency, choice, and teaches avoidance, this system of race control is not generative, we found, of political consciousness and resistance. We find that at each level of criminal justice contact, people's likelihood of engaging in the political process went down. But even the consequences for civic life run even deeper. We found that they moved through life as though they were undocumented. They practiced avoidance, staying out of sight of government institutions and officials. Custodial citizens do not only fail to participate in civic groups and at election time because of a lack of will or resources, rather, they believed their best strategy was to stay invisible to a state that harmed them, to actively avoid authorities of any kind, and to keep a low profile. You got to stay out of their view, Renard explained. Okay? If you be seen too much, they assume you're doing something. Finally, I would just end by saying that rather than seeing themselves as part of a broader system of racial or economic inequality, custodial citizens are explicitly encouraged to adopt a sense of themselves as personally lacking. The broader point is that I opened with Renard because his words remind us that citizenship is not only about formal standing, rights, and incorporation. It is also about the ways in which citizens are socialized to understand the democracy in which they live and their place in it. We must contend with these harms to citizenship so that Renard's words that the criminal justice system is the only government I know don't remain true for his son's generation. Thank you.